Everybody, how's it going? It's Smith here, and we're doing a little review for the midterm exam that's coming up in just a few short days. I'm not sure how much time we're going to have in class to go over all the details, so I'm going to try to get some of that done here on this recording. Um, so it took me a little longer than I was hoping, but I did get a study guide up on Canvas. It's nothing too terribly exciting, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to get that knocked out. So if you go to our course Canvas page, you do your whole login process. I go ahead and do mine. We've got our new credentials here in these last few months. So just give me a second to get that all punched in here. Very good. Get my two-factor authentication. Send me the text and I'll punch that in. And we'll get that going. There we go. Very good. So to find the study guide, you're going to get into Canvas, and once you log into our course page, got our CR in there, 35206. Go over to the Files section. Here we go. Midterm review. I think that's it. Let me just make sure I got the right one set up here. Got two different files. I think I got the right one. Just confirm here. I got new midterm review, and then I've got instructions. Perfect. Okay, yeah, that's the old one. We don't want that. Yeah, so here we go. Midterm examination review. Nothing too terribly exciting, but I'm going to give you some of the more important details here in this little session, this video that I put together right now. So for the midterm, that will be held live in class on, let's just make sure I got my date right. It's this upcoming Wednesday. Looks like it's going to be the 28th. Last day of February. Very cool. 3 parts: multiple choice, fill in the blank, and an essay. It's really more of a sort of a short essay, long answer, I guess, which is fine. And it's going to cover most of the content that we've talked about since chapter 1, since the first week of class. We will be doing it ostensibly on Canvas. First 2 parts are going to be on Canvas. Third part, which is going to be the essay, fortunately, I'm going to have you write it out by hand. I've had some issues with plagiarism and copying and stuff in the past. People are getting on the web and they're cutting and pasting, or they're using AI, stuff like that. So we'll just type that, or excuse me, write that in by hand. All right. It's not going to be anything too crazy, though. I'm not looking for an entire book here, essay response. But for the essay, I've got these are the 7 topics that will be up for grabs. And I'm not going to guarantee that all of them will actually be present on test day, but at least 5 of them will. So my suggestion, study all those topics. Okay, study 1 through 7, and you'll be in pretty good shape. That having been said, on test day, what you will do is each of these questions will have a specific prompt associated with it. So what you want to do right now is study the general topics, but be prepared to answer a certain question related to each topic. I haven't devised them yet. I change them up every semester. Be prepared to answer those topics when we come in on Wednesday. All right, very good. So last week we did a little bit of review. If I'm not mistaken, I gave you some of the questions that would be on the multiple choice part of the exam. Okay. And what I want to do here is go over some of the information for the essay. And interestingly, ironically, most people think they're going to have a really tough time and do the worst with the essay. And they freak out about that. They go, man, I can't write. I do terrible. But interestingly, they tend to do better, most folks do. I think on the written part than they do on the multiple choice and on the fill in the blank part of the test. Um, so don't blow off the multiple choice and just think, because you get to choose between 4 answers that are already there, that's going to be easy. I mean, it's if you've read the book, if you've looked at the slideshows, if you've been to class, if you've done the homework, you're going to be in great shape. There's no surprise questions that you haven't seen before. Um, for the essay, it's honestly not as bad as you'd think. For each of these questions, you're just going to answer one, by the way. You don't have to answer two or three or all seven. You just answer the one. For each of these questions, what I'm looking for is a blend of evidence and commentary. So when you answer the question, I need you to present facts, um, hard evidence, and then draw a conclusion from that. So you'll see that the way that the questions are worded, it's not just, hey, give me a bunch of facts about this. When did this happen? Where did this happen? Who did this? And it's not purely just, hey, well, what do you think about this, that, and the other thing? It's a little bit of both. It's hey, what do you think the meaning of this event is, or what do you think the significance of this time period or ordeal was, and then prove your point to me with evidence. So it's a blend of the two. All right. Example. Let's go through some of these for the essay questions. Look at number 6. That was one of the most recent things we just talked about. Political ideologies of the 1790s. I'm going to bring that up here. Open it up in my handy dandy laptop. It's buried somewhere. Political Ideologies of the 1790s. That would be, I think, chapter 8 in our book. So politics in the 1790s in the United States was, in a word, um, divided. In 2 words, bitterly divided. Okay, it was a very tumultuous period in United States history in which you have 2 political factions: the Federalists and the Republicans, also known as the Democratic Republicans. Different Republicans than we have today. Um, and really, what they were arguing about at their core, these are not like formal political parties the way that we have today, with nominating conventions and caucuses and so forth. Um, one of the shortcomings of perhaps the Constitution, or maybe perhaps one of its advantages, is it did not answer all the questions that were ever going to come up in America's political history. One of the things that it did not address was the creation and existence of political parties. The founders, the framers of the Constitution, couldn't even imagine that there would be differences of opinion. They couldn't possibly imagine that there would be factionalism. The general understanding is that there would be broad consensus on everything, agreement on everything. But by the 1790s, it was clear that that just wasn't going to happen because different people in the United States had different ideas as to what exactly it was that they had created by declaring independence from Great Britain. Would this be a country that mimicked very closely or resembled very closely what Britain was? That is to say, urban, industrialized, commercial, with a strong military and a powerful national government? Would it look like Britain in everything but name and without a monarchy? Or would it be something quite different along the lines of what Thomas Jefferson and his followers had in mind, which is a more rural and agrarian United States, obviously without a monarchy? And depending on where you are in the United States, depending on your socioeconomic status, a number of other factors, you probably have a pretty different opinion of what the country should look like. However, for the first 12 years of United States history, power is wielded by the Federalist Party. And the Federalists are a group of individuals. They're very well organized politically. They have people that are united along a pretty clear-cut party lines on a fairly straightforward policy, and that is articulated by the first Secretary of the Treasury, so one of the most important people in the country under President Washington. That's Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton is, as I've said before, he's one of those few people that's wearing the powdered wigs and waistcoats and knee breeches and so forth. You know, you look at him and you go, "Wow, how quaint! This is 300 years ago, 250 years ago, whatever it was." And you think, "Wow, they're so different than we are today." He's probably the one guy out of that entire generation of American founders that if you were to transport him into the 21st century, I think he'd be pretty comfortable, perfectly comfortable in the world that we're living in today. Urban, industrialized, consumer oriented with a strong national government. I think he'd be pretty comfortable with that. A change of clothes, maybe a venti ice mocha, light ice extra whip from Starbucks, and he'd be in pretty good shape. Hamilton was somebody that really had that forward looking vision for the United States. He's somebody that thinks, hey, look, if this thing's going to get off the ground, we've got to be able to have a national government that's able to bring the states together and form a union that will resist foreign invasions from overseas. It'll be able to um, protect its people from hopefully not the French, but maybe the French, from hostile Native Americans on the borders of the United States, Native Americans that were obviously trying to defend and protect their territory against encroachment by white European Americans. Hamilton envisioned a government that could also protect the civil liberties that were guaranteed by the Constitution. Natural rights like the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to the property, right to due process, and so forth. But it couldn't be too powerful that would overstep its authority. So Hamilton's plan um, was fairly complex, but fairly logical. And it was based on the idea the national government would assume all of the debts, would take on all of the debts that the states had, Virginia, North Carolina, and so forth, from before and during the War of Independence. States like Virginia, North Carolina, Massachusetts, New York, they owed a lot of money to troops, to various private lenders, to other nations for weapons and so forth, money that they'd borrowed to wage the war. So Hamilton's plan is like, look, if we're going to make this country competitive, if we're going to make it withstand the test of time, people have to respect it. They have to be willing to engage with it commercially, economically. And if this is some kind of like backwards, uncharted, hillbilly swamp, nobody's really going to give it respect. So Hamilton's idea was, look, we've got to have the national government, United States government, take on those debts that the states had accumulated during the war. So how's it going to pay off that debt? Well, it's going to issue savings bonds. Bonds are basically loans, shares. So private investors, mostly wealthy people, would hopefully buy those bonds for $100, $500, $1,000, whatever it was. And with that money, the federal government would pay down that debt. Okay. The states would in turn pay back the federal government. And with the revenue that's coming in to the federal government, it could invest in projects. Okay. It could invest perhaps in infrastructure, in building roads, canals, building a bureaucracy that could oversee the development of a broad and modern industrial nation state. Okay. And then over time, as it's making more money, this federal government, off tax revenues like the tariff on imported goods, on the whiskey tax and land sales, it would pay down those debts to the rich investors. And the thought being is, hey, look, if rich people are invested in this government, it's less likely to fail. The country is less likely to fail. So elites, wealthy people, played a big part in Hamilton's plan, and the financial system would be shored up by a private bank, the Bank of the United States. A private bank with shareholders and investors, but it would be chartered or licensed by the United States to make loans, to issue paper money, to hold all the federal government's money, to be the place that was sending out the checks to pay the bills and was receiving deposits and payments from debtors. Okay, so this bank is going to bring some sense of stability and uniformity to the currency system in the United States. Okay, so the national bank is going to be absolutely critical to this nation getting off its feet. But where is the government going to get its revenue? Um, Mind you, we're only a few years away from the American War of Independence. So the founders are still pretty skeptical about too much government. And the ways that the federal government can generate revenue are fairly limited. They don't have an income tax back in the 1790s the way that we do today. You don't have to do your tax returns and look at your paycheck and see how much is going away to Uncle Sam. So selling land, western land, the Northwest Territory is going to be a big source of revenue for the United States. Taxing liquor, taxing booze will be a big source of revenue, and taxing imported goods. And taxing imported goods, stuff that's manufactured in England, because they've got a couple generations head start in the United States, taxing those goods is going to do a couple things. It's going to allow money to come into the federal government, number one. But number two, it's also going to allow people to maybe be more inclined to buy American made manufactured stuff, guns, cabinets, dishes, glassware, things like that, clocks perhaps, by making those imported goods seem more expensive by putting a tax on them. So Hamilton and the Federalists, they have this vision for America that it should be chiefly based in manufacturing things. That includes farm products too, by the way. That includes, the production of items like sugar, rice, grains, cotton, lumber, fish, a number of other things, tar perhaps, dyes. Okay, but making things too, finished goods, clocks, glass, and dishware, furniture, of course, ships, among other things. So it's going to be very consumer oriented. People are going to be buying things not just overseas, but domestically. Okay. And that's going to come through the federal government really directing and guiding the economic growth that's going to be taking place in the United States. The states are still going to have a part, but the states at the end of the day are going to be beholden to that federal government to lead the way. The federal government, by allowing the Bank of the United States to issue loans and credit and paper money and so forth, that's going to establish how willing people are to go out and buy things as consumers. The other vision for the United States is quite different, and that's led by the Republicans, lowercase Republicans, different political party from the 21st century. The Republicans, or Democratic Republicans, to make it even more confusing, um, were folks that more often than not existed in the southern states. Not always, but more often than not, Virginia, Maryland, the Carolinas, sometimes even out west later on, Kentucky, Tennessee. These are folks that believe that rather than the federal government, the states should really be the most powerful part of the United States, the individual states. And the idea of a federal government, like with the Congress, the Senate and House of Representatives, that was just more of an afterthought. Okay, that was firm league of friendship. I think I've heard quoted perhaps by maybe John Green, one of his videos. Okay, that was sort of an afterthought, folks to get together and just see what everyone else was doing. So for the Republicans, they believed that the greatest amount of happiness for the most amount of people could be achieved by allowing independent yeoman farmers to go out and live on their own plots of land and be self-sufficient. So families would clear a tract of land, plant it, and live off the fruits of that land. Corn, potatoes, hogs, cattle, chickens, whatever it might have been. And they wouldn't need to make stuff. Okay, they wouldn't need to manufacture things. They could just simply import those things. Those folks that were productive and hardy enough could sell their surplus agricultural goods into the marketplace, whether that be locally or internationally. And with the money, they could then purchase manufactured goods, consumer goods that they wanted. So in this America, cities are much less important because under the Federalist vision, it's cities where you're going to see the emergence of factories, trades and crafts, manufacturing, right? You need a lot of people to be part of the productive process to support this mass production of goods for global consumption. But in the Jeffersonian or Republican vision, that's exactly the opposite of what they want. The Jeffersonians, they hate the idea of banks. They think banks are run by corrupt and greedy and designing capitalists, I guess. They didn't really have that word at the time. But they thought that bankers really preyed on the ignorance and the hard work of the masses, the working class. The Jeffersonians believed that more happiness lie in economic independence. So there was sort of an inherent distrust of wealthy folks, of the elites, this belief that they would take advantage and prey upon the hard work of the masses. So Jeffersonians were constantly at odds with the Federalists throughout the 1790s. They saw every act that the Federalists put in place as something bordering on treason, if not outright tyranny. So almost every major political episode, you see these two diametrically opposed perspectives develop. For example, um, in Western Pennsylvania in I think 1794, a group of farmers begins to attack tax collectors. Okay, there had been a tax by the federal government under Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton put on whiskey. And so it's farmers, incidentally, who are growing things like various grains, rye, for example, that are pissed off about this. Okay, in Western Pennsylvania, they're so far away from, say, Philadelphia or New York, where they're selling these grains, that it's almost impossible to transport the grain there without it losing its quality and character. So how do they transport it and maximize their profits? Okay, because there's an extreme cost to transport stuff. Roads are almost non-existent. Rather than transport the grain in bundles, they craft it into whiskey, into liquor, where per ounce, per pound, it's worth much more than it would be if it was in the raw grain. So this tax disproportionately affects farmers. Okay, and they're pissed off. They're furious. These guys, farmers out in Western Pennsylvania, they begin to attack the taxmen, and Hamilton's able to persuade President Washington to go out and personally lead 15,000 United States troops to go out and put down this rebellion. It's the Whiskey Rebellion. And for the Federalists, this is just one more example why there needs to be a strong national government to prevent these popular uprisings and preserve the peace. For the Republicans, it's the exact opposite. These are the guys that say, hey, look, another reason that we should distrust Washington and a powerful national government. They're too predisposed to abuse our civil rights. These poor farmers peacefully assembled. They were petitioning their government for a redress of their grievances, and they're brutally squashed by this rebellion. So two totally different perspectives. Okay, and newspapers would openly criticize the opposition. Republican newspapers would just excoriate the Federalists for their tyrannical and oppressive tactics. Okay, the Federalist newspapers would eviscerate the Republican ones, and claim that these Republicans are interested in nothing more than mob rule and total anarchy. So there's these bitter divisions that are taking place in American politics. It continues with the evolution of the Napoleonic War, the French Revolution, into the Napoleonic Wars after 1793. After about 1793, the French Revolution becomes a global conflict. And Britain and her allies are drawn into this war against revolutionary France. Where does this put the United States? Well, the United States is a neutral power officially. President Washington has made his position very clear that the United States must not get involved in this conflict. It's too young, it's too weak, it can't risk its own demise in an effort to oblige itself to one of these two parties. And Republicans are furious at this. Under Jefferson, they go, well, the French were the ones that bailed us out of the American War of Independence. They're the ones that sent us ships and men and weapons and so forth. And we were obligated by this Treaty of Perpetual Alliance in 1778 to aid the French. So the Republicans go, oh man, we gotta help these guys out and help them defeat the British. And the Federalists, especially under Washington, officially didn't want to get involved because it was just too likely that the United States would be wiped out. But Hamilton, even though he's Secretary of Treasury, really advocates for this idea of trying not to get involved, not just for the sake of neutrality and not taking sides, but because ultimately Britain is a more important economic partner. Britain is a more critical ally because of its importation of American raw materials, and the United States cannot risk losing that relationship. So the United States' neutrality is more out of self-interest than it is maintaining the sanctity of a political alliance, or for trying to stay neutral just because it's the right thing to do. It's better for the United States. Okay, so President Washington sends a diplomat, John Jay, over to Great Britain to negotiate, hopefully, a cessation of hostilities. The British are stopping American ships on the Atlantic, seizing their cargoes. They're taking American sailors, claiming that they're British deserters, and impressing them, pushing them into service in the British Navy, which was terrible at the time. Um, and this is a huge insult to American merchants, to America's sovereignty. So Jay is trying to go over there to smooth things over, and the treaty that he comes back with, it does not stop any of this. All it's able to do is really get these two sides to agree not to go to war, the Jay Treaty, and this is, I think, 1794, 95. So the Republicans, they look at this, they go, "Oh my God, he's sold us up the river. This is terrible. He's a con man. He's cozying up to the British when he should be sticking it to the guys." The Federalists go, "Well, look, what do you think this guy's supposed to accomplish here? The United States has not a lot of ammunition to go take a firm position against the British. It doesn't have a massive military. It doesn't have like a massive navy. This is about the best we could do." So there's widespread outrage against John Jay. His image is burned in effigy. Dummies of him are set on fire and burned throughout the United States. But it does avoid what would have been a likely war. Um, Ultimately, it's George Washington. It's his character, the symbol of national unity that he embodies, that really keeps things from getting any worse throughout the 1790s. Washington is the patient and patriarchal, I guess, yeah, symbol of what the United States ought to stand for. He's quiet, relatively soft spoken. He's very reserved in his conversation, and believes that the role of the president should be relatively passive. And in spite of his growing age and challenges to his judgment for a number of political issues, there's on top of this, a French diplomat that comes to the United States, Citizen Genet, trying to rile up American support for the French. Washington's able to diffuse that um, fairly successfully. When Washington retires after 2 terms, his successor, who's elected in 1796, was his former vice president, John Adams. And supposedly, on the day that Adams is sworn in, the 6'2", 6'3" George Washington, which is enormous for the time, looks over at little diminutive John Adams, maybe 5'6", 5'7", something like that. And this smirk on his face, Adams is elated, to be president of the United States. Wow. And Washington looks over and he says, "I am fairly out, and you are fairly in. See which one of us is happiest." Like, be careful what you wish for, buddy. You think this is a good thing, becoming president? It's going to kick your butt, right? Going to put you in an early grave. So with Washington departs any remaining sense of national unity in the 1790s, and even the Federalists under Adams. Adams is also a Federalist. The Federalist Party really devolves into factions. Now that the British are they're kind of still doing their thing, but there's little likelihood of a war that's going to be taking place. Um, the next big problem is France. France has obviously got its navy out on the Atlantic, and it's trying to get supplies in to support its army. against Britain. It's stopping American ships. It's attacking American ships. Neutral vessels. They're not supposed to be doing this stuff. You do this now in the 21st century, major, major international crisis. But at the time, what's the United States going to do about it? So Adams sends an entourage over to France to try to negotiate a peace treaty. There's this sort of undeclared war, quasi-war, almost war, taking place between the United States and France. 1797, 8 or so, 1799. Ships, both sides are attacking each other. And the French negotiators refuse to have any dialogue with the Americans. They say, this is not how we do diplomacy in France. If you disgusting American big dogs would like to have some sort of a dialogue with us, we will require that you will give us how do you call it, a stipend, a bribe, if you like. And the Americans are they're tripping. The American diplomats. One of them, I think, is John Marshall. He's going to be the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. They're tripping. They go, this isn't how diplomacy works. We meet on equal terms to try to find a solution to a serious problem here. Okay. But news of this episode leaks out and it's published in American newspapers and it infuriates, especially the Federalists. The Federalists go, "Oh man, just another reason we got to stick it to these French, right? Got to saddle up with the British here and hope that they defeat this wicked and pernicious, French Empire and this crazy dictator, um, Napoleon." Well, actually, Napoleon is really not even on the stage yet, but right, these crazy French, they've got to be dispatched. So public outrage ensues in what we call this XYZ affair. The French diplomats were referred to in official dispatches as Messieurs X, Y, and Z. Okay, so this is a major disruption to American shipping, and it's a major controversy in American politics. Adams seeks peace. Hamilton, however, still in power at the time, seeks a war with the French, seeks to consolidate American power and control over the Western Hemisphere and the Atlantic, and Adams is really at odds with him on this score. There's a constant barrage of attacks in newspapers from the Republicans, just lambasting the Federalists, as they call them monarchists, they call them elitists. They want to bring back the English crown. The Federalists, for their part in the newspapers, are is it the National Gazette, I think, or the Gazette of the United States, one of the two, are criticizing the Republicans for being just uncouth and uneducated rabble. They want to bring mob rule. So by 1797, I think it is, the Congress of the United States, controlled by the Federalists, passes a couple of laws known as the Alien Act and the Sedition Act, the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Alien Act would obviously allow the federal government to deal with foreigners. In this case, deport them if they were accused in threatening the integrity of the United States government. The Sedition Acts allow the federal government to imprison, at least try, and then maybe imprison folks that were speaking out against the government, that were criticizing it or maligning it. Adams very reluctantly signs these acts, which to this day remains one of the most controversial in American history. They're clear violations of constitutionally protected rights to the freedom of speech. Okay. But they're trying to shut down those critics that they believe are undermining the authority and the power of the United States government. And I think what's very telling about these acts is not so much that they were signed. And a lot of bad stuff happened in the past that they thought at the time was a good idea. But the response is even more important. And secretly, see, at the time, I believe he would have been vice president. Was he vice president? Yeah, Thomas Jefferson, right? Former best friend of John Adams. Along with his colleague, Jefferson's colleague and protege, James Madison, draft up a couple documents, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. And what do they do? These are basically a couple of political doctrines that openly proclaim or argue that the states are the final arbiters or deciders on whether a law, federal law, is constitutional. In other words, they claim that states can nullify a federal act. Crazy, right? Why is this a big deal? This is a big deal because Jefferson and Madison are both from Virginia. They're both Southerners. They're both Republicans. Nullification is going to come up again and again in the next several decades, especially in around 1832 when we get to the debate over the Tariff of Abominations. But it comes up in the South. The Southerners are going to continuously feel like they're being cheated or deprived of what they think are their constitutionally protected rights. And so their argument, it's not written down whether they do or do not have this anywhere. It's not in the Constitution. Their argument is a state, according to how they interpret the Constitution, has the power to nullify or invalidate, cancel a federal law. That will be very, very powerful in building up the Southern defense going into the American Civil War many, many years later in 1861. It's those Southern states that believe it's not the federal government, it's the state government that has the ultimate power. By 1861, they've believe they've had enough of it. So, again, in retrospect, the 1790s period of tremendous social, political discord in the United States, a time of great uncertainty as the United States navigates the very tumultuous waters of international conflict with the British and the French. Political factions in the United States, both refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of the other and threatening to really throw a wet blanket over that warm feeling of cozy national togetherness that was developing after America's War of Independence. So great uncertainty, political divisiveness, um, and a period that really will stand in stark contrast to what comes after the 1790s. We'll call that the era of good feelings. That's coming up very shortly. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end this video since we're about 37 minutes, and then I will pick up another one with our next essay topic. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.